Not in your stomach, I'm not in the ground, not in a limousine, cruising around town. I'm not a bug, not quite a germ, I'm a humble, catchy melody, I'm a earworm, and it go. I only know a couple of tunes. Don't take requests, no fly me to the moon. It's gotta be simple, got no time for rehearsal. How about that jingle from that jewelry commercial? Doc said it's common, Doc said it's fine. Doc, reassure him, I'm totally benign. 'Cause when you search, if you're losing your mind, just remember earworms got to survive, and it go out. I'm not deep, got nothing to prove. Just in here singing that earworm blues. Move out to the country and get away from it all. Find a new ear and start singing along. Everybody! Take it on, hey.
If love only comes to those who wait, God only serves the ones who pray. If patience has left you feeling miles away, I gotta say no to those old cliches. I gotta say go to this brand new way. It might surprise you, you will lie to. You got to find you a new, find you another.
Good evening and welcome to our sleep seminar. Hope you brought your pillows ready. We are very privileged to have Dr. Elizabeth Kanan, who specialises in sleep, to come and share with us lots of her wisdom and expertise. We're really glad you're here in the room, glad if you're joining at home, either live or later as well. And we really hope this is a great value and benefit. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Elizabeth Kanan.
Lizzie's fine. It's really lovely to have this opportunity this evening. We don't often get to do community talks so often when you're a lecturer at uni. We just teach students, and predominantly that's been online since COVID. So thank you for coming in person in 3D. It's very nice to see you all here today. I will tell you a bit about what to expect tonight, but to start with, I'll tell you a little about myself. You're probably thinking, what is a sleep expert? How do you become one? I don't call myself a sleep expert. I definitely don't think of myself as one. I'm actually an exercise physiologist and nutritionist. So my undergraduate degree was in exercise, sports science and nutrition. I went on to do honours at the University of Sydney, looking at high intensity interval training and weight loss. And then I went on to be asked to set up a weight loss clinic at a sleep research institute, and that's where I started my PhD, looking at weight loss in patients with obstructive sleep apnea. The beauty of exercise physiology is you meet lots of people with lots of different conditions, be them healthy or be them unwell, and so there was very much a need for me to quickly learn more about sleep. And today's presentation is just to give an overview. I have not simplified it. I've kept it factual and interesting, but hopefully we'll be able to deliver it in a way that it makes sense and it's nice and clear. So if you do have any questions, please ask them. If I'm not making sense, interrupt me and throw your hand up. If you're interrupting too often, I will ask you to hold those questions for question time. But yes, I just wanted to give you some background so your expectations were met of who I am and what I do. I am a researcher, so I don't just do education. I do also lead research projects in sleep, predominantly in weight loss, but also now looking at some different nutritional programs in patients with narcolepsy, in athletes and measuring their sleep as well, looking at patients who might be suffering from concussion related to their athleticism. So all different sorts of sleep and health stuff. Can I just out of interest get a show of hands, how many people in the room have been diagnosed with a sleep condition by their doctor? Great, I thought there'd be a handful, that might be why you're here. Who is bothered by their sleep but haven't got a diagnosis? Great, and who sleeps really well? Love sleep, great sleeper. We have a great balance. I would say there is a third of each here in this room. Just in terms of the weight loss, I keep this slide in there because this is testament to my wonderful patient's success. So when we're talking about weight loss, you can see she is holding the shirt in this image that she was wearing in the picture with the horse. So we're talking really significant weight loss and keeping it off for periods of time and following that up. So I like to think we really help people in the work that we do at the Woolcock Institute, where I'm employed, and at the University of Sydney, where I'm primarily employed. We're going to start with a little bit of Guess Who, because every good talk begins with an icebreaker. You can yell this out, please. I don't have the roaming mic, so I'll repeat what you say. Which animal, without using your phone to check this, has the shortest sleep duration, do you think? Earthworm. Love it. I don't know much about earthworm sleep. That's not my answer. A flea? I love it. I'd say they have fragmented sleep. Any other thoughts? Shark. Okay. It's actually, there's one person in the room who guessed this, which was my test dummy. Could you yell out the answer, please? Giraffe. It's a giraffe. Giraffes sleep standing up. They're really easy prey for animals, and so they are going to need short sleep so they're not killed through the night. You'll notice the next on the list, which my dad guessed, was a horse. They also sleep standing up. And then an elephant, who also sleeps standing up. So we are now looking at the benefit we've got from an evolutionary perspective in that we can lie down and sleep. And so that already gives us an advantage as being a safe sleeper. Which animal do you think has the longest sleep? I've already written longest, shortest, I can see in my slide. Which animal has the longest sleep? Bedbug. Long. A horse, we've got a guess for a horse. A dog, koala. Us, humans, cats. Cats are close. Cats are definitely high on the list. To your surprise, it is a brown bat. Okay, a little brown bat, not just a brown bat. They also tested the long brown bat as well. And if you want to frown at the waste of resources in terms of research, there was a paper written on this looking at what evidence we have to actually show that the little brown bat has in fact got the longest sleep of all animals. So there you go. They sleep upside down. They're a nocturnal animal as well. And if you're wondering how many hours, what are we talking about? My slide's tiny. Hopefully you can see this. 1.9 hours a day for the giraffe. The little brown bat is 19.9 hours. And humans, we're averaging about 8 hours a day, closely followed by our chimpanzee and our baboon friends. And if you really want to shake your head because you're a mother of children, look how long the human infant sleep is at 16 hours. That seems wrong, doesn't it? This caused me much distress when I was a new parent because my children certainly did not sleep for a broken 16 hours a day. So a little bit of fun there, a few facts. Just to let you know what we're going to be talking about this evening, first I'd like to talk about why we sleep, what we know about what sleep's for. What is sleep? So we'll go into some detail about the different stages of sleep and this idea of circadian rhythms and what they are. how much sleep we actually need, because that's controversial sometimes in itself, and then what drives us to sleep. So it's all well and good to have a need, but how do we fall asleep and stay asleep? Then, unfortunately, for some, we'll be looking, or for all of us actually, we'll be looking at sleep across a lifetime and what happens as we age and what happens to our sleep. And then we'll look more closely at what can go wrong with sleep. So some people in this room will have been diagnosed with insomnia or have had periods of insomnia. Others in the room might have been diagnosed with sleep apnea, which is my area of expertise. And to finish, we'll look at sleep hygiene. So how can we improve it? What could we be doing better? And how can we commit to doing that? So we'll start off with, why do we sleep? Unfortunately, we still don't know. I can't tell you that answer. We're trying to work it out. We've got thousands, millions of dollars of funding going into this, but we actually don't know the answer to that question, which might astound some of you in the room. Now, despite saying that, we do have some physiological functions that we think we can achieve. And overall, you all would know that you feel better after a good night's sleep. It restores balance and it helps with our neuronal centres that we need for our overall health. But in terms of the physiology, what happens inside our body, the theories we have at the moment is that it helps with the maturation of our nerves, or our nerves growing and maturing and being able to do what they're meant to do. It helps with our memory and facilitating memory. So for anyone watching at home who is a student and crams the night before an exam and doesn't sleep, probably not a good idea for your memory. It is there to target erasure of synapses, to forget unimportant information that might clutter up our brain. We have a lot of input throughout the day that's completely useless, but our brain is processing that. It's taking it in, and how much we put value or weight into that consciously versus the unconscious mind is significant. So my bet is that there's some of that filtering or organising happening there. Cognition obviously is a large one, so helping with our learning and our thought processes. There's been some evidence for the clearance of metabolic waste products, so looking at what's generated by neural activity or the activation of nerves and trying to get rid of the waste that's produced as a process of that. And finally, whether it's part of this conservation of metabolic energy. We just simply don't need to be on and busy and active throughout the day, metabolically, internally, in terms of our cells doing active work that uses energy. So, sorry I couldn't answer that question. The next question, or the next thing I was going to talk about, was, what is sleep? So this messy thing on the board is part of what's called a hypnogram. So if we wired you up and we looked at your brain activity or your EEG throughout the night, this is what we'd be looking at. I have no idea how to read that. I don't score sleep studies. It's not part of my expertise. I did learn how to wire up a head many years ago. I wouldn't be able to do it now. But we do have different sleep stages within it. The good news is tonight I'm not going to talk about all of those squiggly lines, but I will talk about these squiggly lines. So here we've got a piece of that trace, or the hypnogram. So this is the EEG. It's the activity that's happening in our brain, and we'll be using leads that are attached all over the brain to see what's happening there. And then we go through 5 different stages of sleep, and some of you will go, oh, I didn't know there were 5. One of them is being awake. So I'm not going to talk much about what happens when we're awake, because right now you are all awake in the room. If you're all asleep by the end, you should listen to my talk to get to sleep in future time. So we've got wake, we've got N1, N2, N3, and REM. I'm going to talk about what each of those do in a moment. But all of those N1s are for non-rapid eye movement. Hands up if you've heard of REM or rapid eye movement sleep, maybe. Keep your hand up if you have some idea what it is and does. Cool. Hands up if you've heard of non-rapid eye movement sleep. Less people. We seem to know a lot about REM. I don't know why as a society. And so those N stages are the non-REM, the non-rapid eye movement sleep. So about 75% of our sleep is in that non-rapid eye movement sleep. That's a deeper sleep. We'll look at that in a second. So normally through the night, we have 4 to 5 of these cycles occurring. And as the night progresses, those cycles get shorter and shorter in length. And unfortunately, as we get older, they get shorter and shorter in length as well. And the way that an infant and an adult goes into those stages is different as well, which isn't great if you've got a little baby, because they don't do what you'd like them to do. So a complete cycle of sleep usually takes anywhere from 90 to 110 minutes. And you can get a feel for how long your stage is if you find yourself waking up every 90 minutes or every 110 minutes if you're a light sleeper and you're going to the toilet a lot, for instance. Or if you go to sleep in the morning, wake up, and you fall back asleep, you might wake up 90 minutes later. And that's been another cycle for you. So that first period of REM is really, really short. And as the night progresses, your REM will get longer. And that's that rapid eye movement sleep. So we're focus to start on that stage 1, that light stage of sleep. And you can see I've put a red box around it here. We've got more squiggly lines. It's a light stage of sleep. It's normally 1 to 5 minutes. And our muscle tone is there. So our muscles are doing some work in that stage. And our breathing is fairly regular there as well. And that's our lightest stage of sleep. Does a little bit, I believe, with memory, but not so much function that we're aware of as such. Then we're moving into our stage 2, N2. Now this is 45% of our night, and this is where we spend most of our time, and it's a deeper stage of sleep. So our heart rate's going to be going down, and our body temperature's going to be going down, and we have these things called sleep spindles. And in the last 10 years, we've been doing more and more research on sleep spindles and what's called a K-complex. I won't talk about them in detail because I don't know much, but they are related to aging and dementia as well. So we're learning that there's some changes in them in relevance there. So these really help us with our memory, both procedural and what's called declarative memory. So learning is occurring during that time, or memory consolidation. We have about 25 minutes in this stage of sleep, and it's in the first cycle. And as we move through the night, it's going to become 45% of our total sleep time spent here. And if you're like me and you grind your teeth, this is the stage that you're doing it in. It's where bruxism occurs. So get yourself a mouth guard with a dentist if it's not working for you from a pharmacy, because it will save you cracking teeth. So then we're going to move into stage 3 of sleep. So this is, again, a non-REM. We haven't been in REM yet. We've been in non-REM, and now we've got into our deeper stage now, stage 3 of non-REM. So we spend about 25% of our night here. This is called slow wave sleep as well. You might have heard about this. It's the very deepest stage of sleep, and it's the most difficult to waken someone from. So you're looking at about 100 decibels still not waking you at this stage of sleep. My dad said that's a chainsaw. Does anyone know that fact? I don't know if that's correct. We can fact check. Someone might throw it into the live stream. As we age, unfortunately, we're going to spend less time in this slow wave of sleep, and we're going to spend more in the one we just left, the N2. So that's a bit sad, because this is our really deep restorative sleep, and you're already probably going, oh, I'm feeling that as I'm getting older, if you've been experiencing poor sleep as you age. So if you do decide you want to wake someone up in this stage, they're going to be really quite groggy, and they end up having this mental fogginess that might last for up to an hour. So if you've got a sleeping teenager that you've forced out of bed, they might be groggy for up to an hour, and that's what's called sleep inertia, this real pressure or this deep sleep that they want to stay in there. So 30 minutes to 60 minutes, they're going to have moderate impaired mental performance. Don't go and get them to do any cognitive tests if you can avoid it. This is where our tissues are repairing. It's where we're growing. It's where we're healing. We're laying down new bone and muscle tissue if we need to. Really important if we're suffering from osteopenia, osteoporosis, or any muscular dystrophy of any sort, or sarcopenia, which is that natural breakdown of muscle that occurs. And it's also really important for strengthening our immune system. So if you're not getting this deep stage of sleep, you might start getting sick more often and having less immune function. It's also the stage where sleep terrors can occur. So if anyone's had a child with sleep terrors, you might notice that you can't really wake them up sometimes. And if you do, they're completely incoherent as to what's going on. It's where sleepwalking can occur as well, and bedwetting as well for some individuals. So we'd normally spend that 25% of our night here, and then we go back into N2, the stage that we were just in before, where we were having our memory consolidation and that overall 45% of our sleep. And then finally, we'd move back into our REM sleep, that rapid eye movement sleep. And the brainwave patterns that we see during this sleep look very similar to what you'd have in your awake sleep as well. So this is a light stage of sleep. It's associated with dreaming, but it's not a restful stage of sleep. We've got what's called atonia, or a lack of muscle tone in our skeletal muscles, all of our big muscles that do things, except for the muscles that are making us breathe, in our diaphragm and our eyes. So people in REM sleep, if you're watching someone in it, you'll see their eyes moving under their eyelids. If you've got a little baby nearby, have a look at them. They're really easy to see in REM sleep as such. The breathing rate normally becomes a bit irregular here. So some people can get nervous watching someone in REM because it's a little bit shaky and a bit erratic and unusual. And it normally starts 90 minutes after you fall asleep, and it gets longer and longer as the night progresses. So when you're in the early hours of the morning, that's when you're going to have your longest periods of REM sleep and the shortest periods of that deep stage 3 sleep. Normally it starts with about 10 minutes of REM in your first sleep cycle in the night, and then the last one can be up to an hour. So you might remember your dreams because you spend an hour there dreaming in bed, and then you'll spontaneously wake up from there. And this is where we have our nightmares and our dreams. So unfortunately, if you have had a nightmare, you'll probably remember it when you wake up from REM. Normally, as I mentioned, you spontaneously wake from REM, and you'll feel good. Spontaneous means it just happens. You're ready to wake up. If someone's woken you up or your alarm's woken you up and you're in stage 2, that's when you're going to feel groggy, and stage 3 was where you needed those really loud decibels to wake you up, or you might not hear your alarm clock. So you want to wake up in your REM sleep if you can. Our brain is really, really active in REM, and we know that because we can look at the brain's metabolism, the amount of energy that it's using, and it's really high in that stage of sleep. It's not restful or not calm. I want you to hold as much of that information as you can, because we're going to talk about napping and sleep cycles and melatonin in the talk in a little bit to come. Putting it all together, just to look at the whole night, because I know I've spoken a lot, we've got here wakeful stage. We've moved to stage 1, stage 2. You can see I've got a natural tremor. I'm sorry, I can't hold things like that still, and I do take blood, so if I'm ever taking your blood, you will be scared by my shake. But you can see that first stage of N3 is really long, and as the night progresses, it's getting shorter and shorter, and in these last cycles of sleep, it's actually absent. So we're getting it in those first few sleep cycles of the night. And the longer sleep opportunity you've allowed yourself, the better the likelihood that you're going to achieve those deep stages of sleep as well. And then we've got this extended period of REM sleep happening then as the sleep progresses. So from 4.5 hours on, the REM is longer. And we're still learning about REM and what REM is. There are some people that have a thing called REM movement disorder, so you'll see some weird muscle movements during REM and all sorts. You can look it up on YouTube if you're interested. So, moving along, we know what sleep is. We know what's happening in terms of brain activity and what happens in the brain when we're trying to sleep. And now we need to look at what's happening in the environment around us. So circadian rhythms, the circadian cycle, people have probably heard of that in the room. We're talking about night and day, light and dark. But we also have an endogenous factor here. So it's part of our body's natural system. And the body can make its own circadian rhythm, and it does this with special genes. They're called period genes and cryptochrome genes. And they code proteins that are active or impact how wakeful or sleepy processes in the body are. So we've got stuff happening in the environment and stuff happening internally as well. The difference with a circadian rhythm and just a light-dark cycle is that we have entrainment by the environment as well. We have cues, and I actually learned a fun word for this talk. It's German, a German word. I don't know much German, but it's, I believe, Zeitgeber. If anybody is German, you can give me a big nod that it's close, Lawrence. Thank you. A Zeitgeber is German for time giver. I liked that. I always like learning the origins of word. So these are things that can entrain or can change that circadian cycle. So light is a big one, temperature is a big one, but also eating food is a big one, and different reactions that happen in our body as well. So we've got these entraining or influencing the environmental factors, and then we have a hormone in our body that's responding to this light-dark cycle as well, which is melatonin. Melatonin or any hormone, is a signal. It's the body's chemical signal for what's happening. And someone asked me, what does melatonin do? That's a great question. What does it actually do? And I had to go through about 5 papers to get a clear answer on that, because we just kind of take for granted that it's produced when we're tired or sleepy. It's simply a signal that tells your brain that it's dark. So if we're looking at the environment and we've got light coming in, that's not going to tell your brain that it's dark. It's telling your brain that it's light. And so if we take a melatonin supplement, for instance, we're telling your brain that it's dark. We can also close our eyes and we're telling the brain that it's dark. So just kind of keeping that information in there as well, because some of you may have been prescribed recommended melatonin and that might be right for you, but we want to consider the hygiene, the environmental, the things that we're doing as well. So we've got our circadian rhythms that can be entrained, and we've got a sleep cycle that gets regulated by the circadian rhythm, and that's influenced or talking to what's called the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And we'll talk about that in a second. Don't worry too much if it's a big long word. We don't talk about it very much at all, but it helps control our sleep cycle. And that circadian rhythm then controls the nocturnal or the nighttime release of hormones, including our melatonin. So we've got an interaction between quite a few things happening here and a dependency there. So if we look, I just mentioned this suprachiasmatic nucleus. We've got light that can come from the sun or not, if we've turned it off, or it can come from light bulbs that are coming in and hitting our optic nerve, and they'll go through and reach this suprachiasmatic nucleus and tell it that it's daytime. And when it's daytime, that switches off the production of melatonin by what's called the pineal gland. If it's dark, then we've got the switched on production of melatonin from the pineal gland. We're still learning a lot about melatonin, and a lot of the research being done is in older people, because we can find that it's a helpful target in high doses, it seems, for Alzheimer's diseases and other conditions. Unfortunately, the regulation of its use in the US has been very different as a hormone, because some people use it as a supplement. So you can find gummies there, and you might find parents giving their children lots and lots of gummies to help them sleep. My problem with that is that often the television might be on, or the lights might be on, or the stimulus might be on, and there's not actually that behavioural paradigm we need for improving someone's sleep. So if we look at melatonin in the day, what should be happening is that when we're awake, we've got this drop in melatonin. So they're falling by mid-morning, early morning, between 6 and 7 or 8 a.m. And then it's going to start increasing as it gets darker, and definitely through that nighttime sleep period as well. And the peak of melatonin is going to be in the middle of the night. If we're looking at a natural cycle, a natural exposure to these zeitgebers, these modifying factors. So if we look at a normal person, my apologies if this is small, we usually have a great big screen, and so I was mindful my slides might have too much on them. So normally we would find, let's start at, where should we start? Let's start at midnight and move around. So we're going to be in our deepest sleep at about 2 a.m, and then at 4:30, we're reaching our lowest body temperature. So to fall asleep, the body needs to be cooling, and to stay asleep, it needs to be cool. And so we're getting to our peak deep sleep usually around that, well, not deep sleep, but you're in a deep sleep at 4:30. And then by 6 a.m, we might be waking up and we've got some daylight on us, and we're seeing a really sharp rise in our blood pressure at about 6:45 in the morning. And then our melatonin secretion is going to stop by about 7:30. You might have your first bowel movement at 8:30 a.m. We can't find if there is a circadian factor there, but a lot of you might have a morning poo moment and you feel irregular without your morning poo. So that could be related to the melatonin. And then we've got the highest secretion of testosterone at 9 a.m. So you'll find some people might want to exercise at that time if they're trying to build muscle, because they're going to have more testosterone for that. And then the peak alertness will be at 10 a.m. So some people in the room might find if they're working, that's when their mind's really sharp and they're alert and they're aware of what's going on around them. And then midday or noon, and then By the mid-afternoon, 2:30 p.m., that's when your best coordination is. So if you are into archery, that's when your target practice might come into play. Or if you're in group sports or maybe doing some personal training, you're most coordinated then. And your quickest reaction time is going to be at 3:30. And so often when we're doing sleep research, we'll try and time our reaction time tests around this and stuff you up by doing it at a different time of day when you don't have peak reaction time. Your greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscular strength is at about 5 p.m. So again, good time for training or exercise if you want to harness that. And then your highest blood pressure is actually at 6:30 p.m. and your peak body temperature at 7 p.m. And from about 9 p.m. you're going to start seeing the secretion of melatonin, and thankfully for us, we'll see suppression of those bowel movements at that time as well. And the digestive system will shift its attention to actual digestion earlier in the system, looking at the stomach and other areas. And hopefully you're going to be asleep by that time. But that all changes if we change light, if we change activity, if we change temperature, if we change what we eat and the timing of what we eat. So it's an endogenous pull, there's a light and dark pull, but there's also a behavioural pull. And then it starts getting really complex and difficult to control and a bit overwhelming perhaps as well. Hopefully not. Hands up if you've got a teenager at home. I knew there would be some in the audience. Sorry for those who don't if this is less relevant. Is that teenager grumpy sometimes? Never. So teenagers are different. They have different timings. So their melatonin, their sleep hormone actually rises an hour later than adults. So they're going to be tired later in the day. And the blue light from devices also can suppress that melatonin. Often they're up gaming in the evening and that's going to disrupt their sleep. And then they have a big dip as well. So their energy is at its lowest at that 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. So that's when, depending on their internal clock, they might not actually feel awake until later in the morning when we're hitting 9 or 10 a.m. They already should be at school then, learning at that time. And the peak energy in them is, peak temperature in teenagers tends to be throughout the morning. So their alertness and sharpness increases at about 10 to 1 p.m. And then in the afternoon, there's that slump. And this is I didn't write this. This is an infographic from I can't remember where exactly, the NIH. So this is one they're using to educate teens. And so they might be hungry and they might feel a bit bleh. And in the adult years, that energy dip is earlier in the afternoon. So for us, it would be 1 to 3 p.m. We feel that afternoon slump, a bit tired, a bit ready for a nap. In teens, it's going to be from 2 to 5 p.m. So often that's when you might, as a parent, be encountering them. And they've got home and they're overtired from their late sleep and they're ready to be in that afternoon slump for another nap. So good to be aware of to help them in that stage. Okay. You might be feeling tired. This is Sleepy Leon. Bethany did a photo shoot for me. My son just would not stop yawning the entire time. He had just woken up from a nap. So has everyone done a Mexican wave before or seen one? It's when the crowd wave their arms. It is in the background, although you may not want to see it. So this side of the room, you're going to start the Mexican wave and we're going to wave across this side of the room. So I would like you, arms up, big stretch. Everyone lift arms on this side of the room and then we're going to follow it along. Lovely, and let's go back again so I can see you're all awake, waking up. Oh, wonderful. I feel magical. Yawns. Yawns are a little bit contagious. Yes. Does anyone notice this? I'm talking about, I'm going to say that word a lot and I'm just going to observe the room and see how many yawn those at home can't see, but maybe you're laughing in your room. So this has never been done before, but I would like to trial a Mexican yawn. Marin, I can see you yawning in the front. So this end of the room, I want everyone to look to the person on your right. Everyone look to the person on your right. Your immediate right. Your immediate right. And if you're at the end of the room, you're going to be looking at the person beside you. And I'd like you, Pearl, I can see you're here in the limelight, to do a fake yawn. You can fake it just like this. Big yawn. Oh, I've got some people. Wow. Keep trying. Doing your fake yawn. Some are real, some are fake. It's taking. I love this. I think this experiment works. I might do this while I lecture when I go back to uni. Why do we yawn? Does anyone know? We don't know. We don't know that. For a while, we thought it was to oxygenate the brain and to give us a big boost of oxygen, but that doesn't seem to be the case. We actually think it's temperature lowering now. And so we said before that when you're falling asleep, we need your temperature to drop, and so that yawn can be part of it. There was another piece of evidence I found that I can't see there. Oh yes, social empathy. So there was some studies done to look at people's ability to show empathy, and they found that those who yawned more were more empathic, which I found interesting. I have my own theory, if there are any evolutionists in the room, but I like to think that it's part of holding a community together. And so if we all get tired together, we're all going to sleep together, and then we're going to wake at a similar time and eat breakfast at a similar time, gather at a similar time, hunt at a similar time. It holds that community or that social fabric together. So yawn with your family and keep in tune with them. And I apologise if you spend the rest of my talk yawning now. Anyways, bit of fun to hopefully wake you up a little bit. So we know a lot more, hopefully, now about sleep than when we started. We've learned about circadian rhythms, we've learned about sleep cycles. Now we're going to look at how much sleep we actually need. I know that I run best off 7 to 8 hours. I know all these facts about sleep. I probably get 5 to 6 a night. On a bad week, I probably get 4 to 5 a night. Why do we do this? Hands up if you're a 7 to 8 hour kind of person. Yeah. Who's a nice 4 to 5er? Yeah, some people can run with less. Who's a 10 to 11? Yeah, some long sleepers in the room. I love it. So again, another wonderful infographic here. When do we start worrying is probably what's more important. So 4 to 5 hours a night consistently, we start worrying that that's not enough sleep, and you'll have potentially immune issues related, mood issues related, poor health related. And long sleep, 9 to 10 hours or more, seems to also be healthy for us. So the cardiovascular outcomes are also concerning, as well as metabolic outcomes, so different conditions. So the less than 6.5, more than 8.5, that's when doctors might start asking you lots of questions about your sleep. This image here looks at lifespan, so a newborn's 14 to 17 hours a night. The dark blue is what's recommended, the light blue is what's appropriate, and anything in yellow is not recommended. And this is from the Sleep Foundation, which is a group over in the States. So, pardon me, when we move on beyond teen, well, if we look at teens, they're 8 to 10 hours. If we're looking to school-age kids, it's 9 to 11 hours a night. So I like to think from school age onwards, or even preschool, we've got a little bit more control over kids' sleep by routines and bedtimes. Infants, there's only so much you can do to get infants to sleep sometimes. And then as we get older, our requirement actually reduces to 7 to 8 hours a night, which is interesting. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So what drives sleep? We've talked about what it is. We've talked about circadian rhythms, which are a component of what drives it. But we also have this thing called sleep pressure. And we need to accumulate sleep pressure through the day in order to fall asleep. And when we are asleep, that pressure will dissipate. So the longer you're awake, the more that sleep pressure will be built, and then as you sleep, that pressure dissipates or goes down. That deep sleep, the amount of that deep stage of sleep that we get, is proportional to the amount of sleep pressure that we've accumulated. So the more sleep pressure we've accumulated, the more deep sleep we're going to get. So we also then, that's called process S, and that's referring to our homeostatic sleep drive, the drive to make us sleep that's a natural part of our homeostasis or maintaining normal. Then we have a circadian drive as well, and this is process C. And we spoke before about the circadian rhythm, and that's a nice constant, hopefully, depending on light exposure. So we've got some control over that if we're looking at the times that the lights are on and off and that we're in daylight or not in daylight. So if you're working in a building and you can be near a window, do it. And if you can be at home and near a window, do it. And if the sun's gone to bed, turn lamps on, get all these overhead lights off. We won't do that now because you will all fall asleep while I'm talking. And try and replicate those normal rhythms of the day. And that's then going to interact with you staying awake to build sleep pressure and going to sleep to dissipate that sleep pressure. So let's look at what happens when we manipulate that a little bit. So we've got at the top, we're just looking now not at the circadian rhythm, but just at our normal rhythms. And you can see that we've got that sleep pressure building while we're awake, dissipating while we're asleep here between, in this person, 11 to 7 a.m. Then we're going to take away their sleep on the middle day. We're going to say, you stay awake. You're not allowed to sleep. And you can see that this sleep pressure builds. Unfortunately, I do have kind of a scale by notches. I know there is one scientist in the room probably shaking his head, but you can see 1, 2, 3 notches. I've now built my sleep pressure up to that 3rd notch, whereas before it was in that 2nd notch in the graph. So there's a higher building of sleep pressure, but it's still dissipating in that sleep window. And we just said that the amount of deep sleep that you get is proportional to that sleep pressure. So if you're going to keep yourself awake and not sleep, you still should get deep sleep after that to dissipate that sleep pressure. And then let's throw a nap in there. Is anyone in the room a napper? Yeah, cool. Keep your hand up if you're a short napper. You're a 10 to 15, 20-minute napper. Couple of you. Hands up if you just let it roll and you just, yeah, great. So this is a let it roll nap. This is a 2-hour nap that this person's having at 5 p.m. They're breaking all the rules. And so they've had a 2-hour nap here, and you can see 2 notches. They've got dissipation or a reduction in the amount of sleep pressure they've got. But in that window between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. when they've woken up again, they're building a bit more sleep pressure. So just being awake builds that pressure, and then they're able to dissipate it again, and then they're waking up at 7 a.m. and building pressure again to the same degree. So first day of napping, that's fine, but 2 hours, we're seeing some dissipation. And then if we throw in those circadian influences as well, that means it keeps you up later, and then you've got shorter sleep opportunity probably occurring. That's when it starts to get a little bit risky with a long nap. So I would recommend, if you are a napper, 10, 15, 20 minutes at most. Can anyone remember? What stage of sleep might you get into in that 20-minute window? 1, 2, 2, 2. Let's skip back. Oh, do I want to do this? I'm going to skip all the way back. All the way back. No. So we said stage 1 is 1 to 5 minutes. Stage 2 is up to 25 minutes. So if we're doing our nice short nap, we're getting into that stage 2 sleep, but we're not getting into that deep, difficult to arouse state of sleep. And we'd recommend having that nap before 3 p.m. in the afternoon, especially if you're a troubled sleeper. So if you're someone who struggles a bit with sleep. If you need a long nap though, and you're doing that because you are working shift work or you've got a big sleep debt for some reason, you might have gone out and had a great time and didn't go to bed, or something particularly stressful's gone on in life and you can't sleep, that's now called catch-up sleep. So it's when you're catching up on sleep that you've missed. So that's different to just habitual long napping. So really try to think about why am I napping? Do I have a big sleep debt? Am I needing to catch up on sleep? Or is there something else going on that's meaning that I'm particularly tired? Do I need to look at my bigger lifestyle and what's going on in my broader lifestyle that I'm feeling so tired I need a rest? And we've talked a lot in our sermon series about rest and that opportunity to rest and the importance of rest. So is that absent and you're trying to use sleep when you should be using rest? They're very different, very different. So that's what I have to say about napping. The next thing, my eyes are so terrible, sleep across a lifetime. I've been dreading this bit of the talk because I don't have great news, I'm sorry. If we look at sleep across the lifetime, you can see in green, this is awake. What are you noticing? growing, it's getting bigger. Yeah, we're awake more. Okay, unfortunately. You can see our scale from 50 years onwards, but especially from the 75 mark, we're seeing some increase in that awake time. Look at our REM sleep. It's huge here. I have not yet spoken about each life stage, and I'm going to, which is I find quite interesting. But you can see this REM sleep's really high up to 2 years of age, and then it normalizes, so that's not changing so much. But what we're losing out on is that deeper stage of sleep. Hands up if you've noticed as you're getting older that your sleep is feeling less restful. You're waking up and you're feeling tired. I am sorry to say that that is particularly normal, and you might want to use naps to help you with it, and that's okay. Try and keep them to 20 minutes. Try and keep them early in the day. Try and keep that nice flow of rhythm still. You might find that your bedtime needs to be a bit earlier because you're waking earlier naturally. And for the women in the room with menopause as well, that does disrupt sleep as well. So there are lots of other factors of play as we age. So we've spent a lot of time looking at sleep cycles, and I've got this picture. I apologise again, it's a bit of a little one, but you can see that these are our deep stages of sleep down the bottom here. This is in a young adult, typically someone up to the age of 30, 40 years of age. And in older adults, look how scattered this is. We're going REM, 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 non-REM, non-REM. We're in that stage 1 there a bit, and then back awake again. We're getting into a deep stage 1, 2, 3, and then 4 times, but that's at 6 a.m. that this person has hit a deep stage. It's a little bit all over the shop sometimes with what's happening, and it's not going to be the same every single night as well. So your best bet is to give yourself a longer sleep opportunity. Make sure you're not staying up till 11 o'clock and falling asleep on a couch and then moving to your bed, and then might have had a few cups of tea late at night, or you might have had some champagne late at night. So what are you doing in the evening as well that might interrupt that sleep? And are you having to move that sleep environment as well because you've woken up and gone, oh, I fell asleep on the couch. I shouldn't have done that. So people can get into the rhythms that are unhealthy as well for sleep. We want to give ourselves the best chance for a good sleep opportunity in our bed at a reasonable hour with nice, calm, dim lights, and we'll talk more later in the talk about what we can actually do. And we want to be in a comfortable sleep environment, something that's cool. You're not too hot. You're not layered up in big, heavy blankets and pyjamas and whatnot. And that if you are drinking drinks, they're not caffeinated late in the evening as well. And you have a meal, that you're not skipping the meal because you just don't feel very hungry and nibbling all night, because we just said in our Zeitgebers, the eating was one of those things, one of those time shifters as well. So if we have a little look across the lifespan, if we look at newborns and infants, has anyone got a newborn at home? I will talk briefly of them. No, lucky. You probably wouldn't be here. Maybe in the live stream they do. So they've got no regular rhythm whatsoever. They sleep about 16 to 18 hours a day, apparently. And the longest episode is 2.5 to 4 hours. But they only have 3 types of sleep. They have quiet sleep, which is like our non-REM. And then they have active sleep, which is similar to our REM. And then intermediate sleep. So where we go into non-REM stages and out in REM, they start in REM. So that's why I said find yourself a newborn if you want to see rapid eye movement, because they start there and then they come out of there. And they normally only have 1 or 2 cycles at a time and then wake up, and they don't have circadian rhythms at all, which is terrible if you're a parent. And so normally 2 to 3 months of age, in case anyone at home's watching, about 2 to 3 months of age, they start to develop a circadian system or cycle. And normally that's during the waking day. They have longer periods of wakefulness, and then their nocturnal sleeping might not start until they're 2 years old. Their melatonin and cortisol start cycling from about 3 months of age, and then the REM sleep is going to shift then to the later part of the evening. Normally a sleep cycle for a baby is about 50 minutes. And we said earlier, ours is 90 minutes roughly, so about half the time of our sleep. And that's why you just feel so rotten in those early days. Toddlers, aged 1 to 3 and 3 to 9, at about age 2 to 5, the total sleep time is going to decrease. So they're about 13 to 11 hours need per day, and they're going to have circadian sleep preferences as well. And that means that they're either going to tend towards being a night owl. You might notice your toddler wants to be up a bit later, or a morning lark. I certainly have one morning lark and one night owl, which is annoying because I am not both of those things. And children tend to have a longer REM latency period compared to adults. So that means that they spend more time in a deep stage of sleep as well. Then we get to our adolescents. I have one in the room, which is great, a 10 to 18-year-old. Hello, Jill. And you need 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night. Are we getting that? Yeah, kind of. Mum says yes, so hopefully you're sleeping in your bed. So this can be influenced by hormonal changes as well that happen during puberty, and our slow wave sleep and sleep latency time, so the amount of time it takes to fall asleep actually will decline, so you fall asleep quite quickly, and the time that you spend in stage 2 is longer. So the deep sleep you're in less, which means you're going to feel a bit grumpy and a bit less restored. And at about mid-puberty, then that greater daytime sleepiness occurs compared to earlier stages of puberty. So often it can be 15, 16, and those in the room with 15, 16-year-olds might be feeling that grumpy, tired, sleepy teenager who also might be trying to stay up late at night. Then we hit our adults, and we have an earlier sleep-wake time and less consolidation of our sleep, unfortunately. And older adults have been shown to wake up an hour and a half earlier and to sleep 1 hour earlier than younger adults as well, who might be 20 to 30. So you might have spent your whole life sleeping really consistently, and all of a sudden you're wanting to go to bed earlier and you're waking up earlier. Go with it. Don't fight that, because you might just end up having less sleep. Are men and women different? Yes, of course we are. So men tend to spend more time in that light stage, the N1 stage of sleep, and they have more nighttime awakenings, so they're more likely to complain to us about being tired or having daytime tiredness. Compared to women, we're really good at maintaining that slow wave sleep compared to men, but our complaints tend to be about difficulty falling asleep in the first place. And anecdotally, some of you are smiling and nodding and going, yep, I have a deep sleep, but it takes me forever to fall asleep versus I'm getting up constantly. And I spent my afternoon with my parents, and they both offered that without me even asking. So tends to be the case. So we're going to talk a little bit now about what can go wrong, or when things do go wrong. So we have obstructive sleep apnea being our number one option for things going wrong. This is where the upper airway will close through the night. So it's different to snoring. Snoring is a partial closure of that upper airway, and the soft palate is meant to be open during the night and the air passes through. You don't have to volunteer it, but any snorers in the room, maybe a couple? I am if I lie a certain way and I forget to put my mouth guard in. So what will happen is that air vibrates across that partial opening, and depending on the positioning of your tongue as well, it can be particularly loud. Obstructive sleep apnea is where it completely closes, and so there is an obstruction of air passing through that airway. And if you have someone in bed and you're noticing that they're stopping breathing through the night, it is possible that it's not just snoring, it's obstructive sleep apnea. So it's a real floppiness, that loss of patency in the upper airway. The problem, obviously, is then there's no air, therefore there's no oxygen. So the brain is exposed to these frequent periods of hypoxia, or low oxygen, through the night. And so people are going to be waking up feeling really rotten, despite maybe having a full night's sleep, depending on how often it happens. The patients I see vary. Some people will have 10 to 15 events per hour. Anything 15 to 30 is considered severe, but I might have a patient in the room who's 140 events per hour, 60 to 90 events per hour, that they are stopping breathing. So that's when they're measuring a reduction in that airflow through the airway. So if you think your partner is snoring, but maybe even stopping breathing, please do get it checked. It is very important for your health, but also for you just feeling functional during the day. If you've got 90 times an hour that you're stopping breathing, you're not going to feel great, no matter how much sleep you get. So the diagnosis of this is usually with a sleep study or polysomnography. You'll get a trace looking like the ones that we got, but your doctor will interpret that. Depending on where you're sent for that, you might get wired up and sent home, and a lot of the pharmacies are now offering that with CPAP diagnostics versus going to a sleep lab. So if there's something more concerning going on, or if you had a pharmacy one that wasn't great, they might get you to do an in-lab study, which means you get to go and sleep over either at a hospital or a private clinic. The place I work is the Woolcock Institute in Glebe. Some of you may have been there. So it's like a hotel room. You've got an ensuite. They wire you up. Believe it or not, you do sleep. And then you'll get the measurements later. And it's good to discuss that with a sleep physician if you can. If you were to be diagnosed, or if people in the room have, there's a few different options. I've put up a picture of a CPAP machine, and there's all sorts of masks. This is a partial mask. You can have a full face mask, and you can also have just nasal prongs as well. And the goal of all of these devices is to keep the airway open. So they blow air in, and they keep the airway open through the night so that you're not having those frequent desaturations, that frequent drop in oxygen through the night. 50% of people prescribed it can use it, and can use it is classified as 4.5 hours a night use of the machine. So pretty hard to use, and if you don't put it on, you've still got the condition. So it doesn't cure you, you just have to wear it, and then it keeps the airway open. This leads me to the work I do, which is in the diet and exercise front. So if you're exercising, if you're looking at moving for about 30 minutes most days of the week, or anywhere from 3 to 7 days a week with a couple of resistance training exercises, you could reduce your sleep apnea by 30%. And then it doesn't mean you have to wear the mask for it to work. That's a permanent improvement on what you're doing while you're being active. So you have to remember to have it on. So for some people, this is a good option and something they can do. The other thing you can do is losing weight. Number one risk factor for sleep apnea is weight and weight gain. Normally, as people gain weight, they increase their risk of sleep apnea by 33%. And as they lose that weight, though, we improve it by 24%. So about 5 to 10% body weight loss, half a kilo a week for anywhere up to 6 months, depending on where you're starting. That can be enough to then reduce your sleep apnea severity. It sounds crazy, but a 500 calorie reduction a day will normally give you half a kilo weight loss a week. An apple's about 100 calories. Okay, a sandwich is probably about 250 to 300 if you have a nice full sandwich. So it's not a lot of food reduction. Some simple changes can be enough. Or you might want to go the whole hog and go, you know what, I'm going to use an OptiFast diet for 2 months with the help of a clinician, and I'm going to use shakes and reduce it by 10 or 15 kilos in 2 months, and then look at a sustainable lifestyle change to keep it off. And that's what some of my research looked at as well. And we go, oh, that's good, but you put it back on. We found that people could keep it off for 12 months. It's the after part that's important, though. So what are you doing to sustain that loss? What's the bigger picture of change? So CPAP treats it, doesn't cure it. Exercise reduces it, but if it's severe, it won't eliminate it. Dietary weight loss reduces it, won't cure it if it's severe. You might need a combination of things there. Okay? And if we leave it untreated, there is some concerns around strokes, heart disease, although that's very controversial at the moment because CPAP doesn't always reduce those risks, but also diabetes is a really big risk factor there. So there's an interplay between different things happening. Okay, this is a bit of a lull, a bit of a moment. Lunig, is anyone a fan? Yes, I'm a big fan. I love Lunig. So I'm going to read this one out. It's called the 3 a.m. Wake Up. Yet again, you wake at 3 a.m., the hour of black death. While you were sleeping, all meaning has collapsed, and now only darkness exists. Poor little plankton of the night, you have been swallowed by the great whale of doom. Down, down, down you go into sheer futility. It's all impossible, you groan, and then you disintegrate into unconsciousness. 7:30 a.m. finds you at the table, reconstructing your personality, rebuilding civilization. This takes half an hour. At 8 o'clock, like a prayer, the cup of tea rises to your lips. A bird sings. The wail of doom is now a sardine on toast. Some of you will sniggle and enjoy that one. I love it. Does anyone wake up and go, it's 3 a.m.? The hour of doom, the witching hour, the devil's hour. Why is it 3 a.m. that we wake up? This leads me to the next part, insomnia. So insomnia can be chronic or it can be acute. Hands up if you've had trouble sleeping for a period of time. Were you stressed? Were you sad? Were you angry? Yeah. There is certainly psychological components to insomnia, and the first line of treatment is often that. It's to look at what else is going on. Chronic insomnia is where it's persistent, 3, 6 months or longer, and it's trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep for an adequate amount of time. So some people can fall asleep easily, but they're waking up, and when they wake up, they're awake for a while. Or they're not falling asleep, and then they're awake for a really long period and not able to sleep for a big quantity of time. So what causes it? All sorts of things. Jet lag or crossing time zones, light emissions or blue light, stress, alcohol, smoking, heavy food, medication, environmental factors as well, or bedding. But largely, it's generally when there's things going on in life, and it's the persistence of that that can be a problem or not a problem. So complaints of difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, where there's persistent or significant impairment on your daytime function. You might have a family history of it. I come from a family of terrible sleepers. I'm a wonderful sleeper. I love sleep. But no one else is, so they don't like me very much when I talk about my wonderful sleep. Environmental factors as well, different precipitating factors in life, such as stress, family, work, relationships, and loss, grief. Grief is a big one. But then we have perpetuating factors. So while we might have all these predisposing ones, we have factors that keep it being a problem. And so that can be staying in bed to make up for that lost sleep. So some people with insomnia actually spend long amounts of time in the bed trying to make up for that sleep, trying to give them the sleep opportunity. They might be reading, they might be on the computer, they might be working in there. What are they doing in the bed is a big question. And then also this development of sleep anxiety, the longer those sleep difficulties persist. So it starts to become a learned behaviour. And so a lot of people, when they first come in and for treatment of insomnia, the first thing they'll say is, I can't sleep. Say, well, you can. You'd be dead if you didn't. No, I can't. I don't. I can't. I've been trying. Nothing works. I can't sleep. And so the immediate thing that you're trying to do is help someone learn they can. Yes, they're not at the moment, or it's reduced, or it's not good, but they can. And it's that fundamental learning and acceptance in someone's life. So often if you were seeking treatment for insomnia, they might look at actigraphy devices. They'll put a watch on and they'll look at your behaviour patterns through the day and what you're doing through the day. And we'll look at naps. Are you napping? Is there light exposure? Because they've got light monitors. You are sleeping. Not much, might only be 3 hours, but you're asleep. You can sleep, and then let's build on that. So there's different treatments for insomnia that might be related to the mind to stop or quieten the chatter, or there might be treatments like sleep restriction therapy, which is where we'll say you can't go to bed till 3 a.m. and then you have to wake up at 6 a.m. So we'll reduce your sleep window, and then we'll slowly titrate or extend that over time. And some of my colleagues have been building apps to help people to do that at home without needing to see a sleep doctor. There's cognitive behavioural therapy, there's acceptance commitment therapy, and then obviously all the sleep hygiene that comes with it. But it's hard. It's a big deal and a big change. We're nearly to question time, which is great for everyone, but I'm going to do a quick activity. So if you can all stand up and close your eyes. Don't worry, no one's going to push you over and catch you. It's not an exercise in trust. So closing your eyes, and I want you to imagine that you've just got out of bed and you've got a really busy brain. So we've got all those little thoughts moving around, chitter-chattering and telling you things. And I want you to imagine yourself walking to the bathroom with no shoes on. And you're going to stand at the sink and hold the sink because your hands need somewhere to secure you. And I want you to feel your toes on those cold tiles and wiggle them and dig your toes in. Feel that ground really hard against the floor, against your feet, pushing against you. And just imagine big breaths that you're grounding yourself for a moment and you're getting your attention away from those out of control thoughts and you're just bringing your toes into the ground, feeling the sink, noticing the noises and letting them pass, and just slowly breathing again and feeling that cold, cold floor. And just take as long as you need in this space. And then when you're ready and you're calm, you can go back to your bed and try and pass all of those leaves or worries away. Okay, great work, everyone. Hands up if you felt a little peace just from that short 10-second exercise maybe. It's very calming. So what you want to do, you can sit down if you like, or you can stand and wiggle if you like, but you want to take your attention away from that snowball, that out of control thoughts, the busyness in the mind and what's happening, and cold temperatures, cold surfaces. That's why I got you to hold the edge of the imaginary sink. And you could all visualize those tiles, even though we were not near tiles. That helps reground and to feel connected again to a place of steadiness. And then you can go back to your Loonig cartoon where your sardines on your toast instead of the whale and the 3 a.m. So it's just breaking that cycle. Oh, I didn't do the Optus phones off. That's okay. So relaxation techniques, whether they be recording soundtracks that you listen to, breathing. I'm hopeless at breathing. That doesn't work for me. For me, it's movement. And to calm down, I actually need slow, quiet movement with my eyes closed. If my eyes are open, I get distracted. So find what feels right for you. And then we need to start to challenge some of those learned reactions to them. I'm too tense to relax. I don't like the feeling of being relaxed or relaxation. I feel guilty wasting time. I can't find the place or the time to do so. I'm not getting anything out of this. My mind's wandering or it feels unnatural. Let them go. Let's just give it a real crack if we are. So treatment of insomnia we've gone through. Medication hopefully is a later line of treatment. So some people will need medications to support them, but your doctor would be prescribing, and ideally a sleep physician. I've seen some really scary prescriptions with GPs who aren't experienced in managing insomnia. So if you're going to that length, I highly recommend getting an opinion from a sleep physician. Otherwise, there are hopefully some other lifestyle changes people can take up. So, last part of the talk, and then it's Q&A time. We're going to talk about hygiene a little more. So, has anyone heard of the term sleep hygiene? It's not about how clean you are when you sleep. It is about good sleep practices or optimal sleep conditions. So, our melatonin levels typically rise a couple of hours before we'll naturally feel ready for bed, if we've allowed them to by turning off or dimming lights so that we've got that reduced light fall on our SCN, our suprachiasmatic nucleus. So you want to keep the lights low, turn off those overhead lights, stop using your computer, your smartphone or your tablet if you can. If you're on a Kindle device, there is some evidence suggesting they're safe to use because they're a dim light, so don't turn the brightness up too much. And if you are using devices, a lot of them have those blue light emitting reductions, so you might notice your phone automatically turns gold at night and everything looks very yellow. That's why. So blue and green light neutralizes or switches off melatonin's effect. This is a weird one. If you are watching TV, try and be at least 6 feet from the screen. I'm 5 foot, so probably about that far from the screen height-wise. Or turn it off if you can. Do something calmer, knitting, cross-stitch, gentle, quiet, non-stimulating reading. But during the day, there's a lot you can do as well. getting exposure to daylight in the morning and the afternoon, taking a walk outside, okay, or sitting beside a sunny window. Get light on you early and sleep with your curtains open. Let the light into your room if you can. If you've got a... I think my mic... Oh no, we're okay. If you've got a QR scanner, feel free to go to that link. Don't do it now. It actually takes about 10 minutes to do this questionnaire. But this is a morningness, eveningness questionnaire, and I've put the link there too. It's chronotype-selftest.info/index.php. But this is the morningness, eveningness questionnaire that helps us to understand if we tend towards being a morning or an evening person. You go, well, I know that. I'm a morning person, or I know that I'm an evening person. The nice thing it does is it can take your scores, and then I'm just highlighting 2 pieces of information it will give you that's helpful, which if you're like me, you couldn't read. But it will estimate the likely onset of your melatonin. And so you can take that piece of information and use it as to when you're really turning your lights off and you're getting your sleep environment ready, because you know that your melatonin's starting. And it also tells you what your natural bedtime is. So it's looking at what your preferences are. If you could do whatever you want, when would you likely be wanting to fall asleep? And then let's gear everything towards that. So for me, it suggested 10:45 p.m, melatonin from 8:30. This was really helpful because straight away I went, wow, my kids sometimes are up until 7:30, and then I'm buzzing around, cleaning up dishes, doing all the prep for the next day until about 8:30. That's when my melatonin's kicked in. And at 9 p.m, I sit at my computer and I start working. And then it gets to 10 or 11 and I get really tired and I need to keep working, and then it pushes later. So straight away I went, something's got to give. I can't work that way. I need to look at what my day is doing. So look at what yours is. See when your melatonin's naturally happening and think about, what am I doing at that time of day? Am I favouring falling asleep with a dark environment, things switched off, things being calm? So let's commit to sleep. Let's think, how can sleep be a priority? Hands up if after tonight, or maybe even before tonight, you wanted to prioritise sleep but you haven't maybe taken it seriously and put it first. Good. So a lot of people want to go to bed earlier and they want more sleep, but they don't actually think and then commit and prioritise what that bedtime is. So choosing an earlier time that you can realistically get up perhaps is something to consider. Having morning light on you without sunglasses, keep your eyes open, keep your nervous system receiving light. Moving outside, so either just eating your breakfast outdoors or going for a walk or a run or something outdoors with light on you. Water the garden, putting out the washing, doing that in the morning rather than the afternoon if you can, and get your head around, if you do need treatment, what treatment could be best for you. If we're talking insomnia, what could you have started doing that you haven't yet? But my advice is always head first, body second. What treatment makes the most sense for you? And then that's where you can start. What of those things make the sense for you to do? And we've talked about a lot of different options. And that is all. Quick thank you to my colleagues at the Woolcock Institute, where I was a baby researcher and have grown. They have taught me immense amounts about sleep, and a lot of tonight's talk has been thanks to their teachings over the years, and to the Uni of Sydney for employing me so I can do things like this as a part of my job and reach the community at large. But thank you. Now, hey, there is a roaming mic. There's also an online forum, so I can move away from the lectern and get some exercise. But does anyone have any questions? Wow, I don't know what those noises are.
Hi.
Hello.
You said 2 things that kind of contradict what I do, because I have nights when I might lie awake 3 or 4 hours. But you said turn off the telly and do something like your cross-stitch or your sewing and what have you, which is what I do.
Yep.
But to do that, I've got a really bright light over my shoulder.
Yeah,
So...
yes, yep. So with the bright, those high lux or those bright emissions of light, If you have sleep problems, that's where I try to move it to an activity that doesn't require as much of a light emission. So for some people, they can do activities with a lamp on and it's enough to see. But if you're experiencing sleep problems and you are waking, that bright light and the concentration may be too much. So some people who knit a lot, for instance, and they're not doing an intricate pattern, they could move to something a bit less involved. That hands and the rhythmic movement might be, when we say what makes sense, that might be part of the what do you need. And we need that rhythmic hand movement. But what can we do with less of a light source and still obviously get satisfaction from it? So, yeah, not too much bright light. I'm familiar with the lamps. They're very bright. Yeah. Oh, we might use the mic. Sorry, we'll just use the mic so they can hear online as well.
Statistics seem to show that traffic accidents can be caused by fatigue,
Yes.
alcohol and speed, or drugs, etc.
Yep.
What's your research in terms of driver fatigue, and how can that be helpful to prevent accidents?
Yeah, so a lot of our protocols in different research studies where we might be looking at different sleep restriction protocols or different drug protocols even, where we might be looking at a drug that helps someone with sleep apnea, we incorporate that. So we look at what's called lane deviation, so how much someone moves from the centre of the road as driving. And we normally find that we need quite a long period to show effect. So it used to be a 90-minute driving simulator, and in some cases it's 180 minutes worth of simulated driving. It's all very consistent that the less sleep, the worse the outcomes, the more the lane deviations and the more the hazard for accidents. So when we're looking at shift workers, we're trying to ensure there's adequate rest in their sleep opportunities between shifts. We're looking at ways to not use naps strategically as such, so we'd be using catch-up sleep in many of those shift workers to ensure that they're not having short sleep because they're doing long-haul drives. But we also check them for sleep apnea as well and look at that kind of a fatigue. And in some of the vehicles now, they actually have monitoring, so there'll be a number of cameras around the drivers to look at their concentration, so movement of the head. And if they suddenly move their head, their head office will call them and say, when's your last break? How far are you from depot? You need to pull over. So there's a lot more enforcement over rest breaks for those individuals as well. Yeah.
Sometimes the people use the tranquilizers to treat the insomnia, and some of the psychotropic drugs, and how it is justified, because it creates a lot of problems if your health problems.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry. Yeah, so just for those at home, the question was how can we justify the use of psychotropic drugs for helping to manage people with insomnia or who may have short sleep when there is these broader health problems that stem from them? I think it's a great question and a great observation. So I think that it's really important to balance the need for medications to help someone sleep for their health benefit versus have we explored other healthier options. So that decision needs to be made and continually reviewed as well, because in many instances we build up a tolerance to those drugs, and so the doses need to be higher and their likelihood of addiction and abuse is high as well. So you need to keep seeing the doctor, but I think there's also that responsibility that we keep trying seriously these other behavioural changes as well. And my hope is that these kinds of education sessions can help people gain control a little bit earlier before the need for medications, or that the medication is needed for a shorter time until that person can gain control. But it is a slippery slope. From the point at which they're used, it can be really difficult, absolutely. Yes.
Oh, thank you. This question is probably not, it's related, but it's not exactly in line with what we're learning tonight. But I've come across over the years many times when people have said that the doctors in training, internships, that sort of thing, are going for long shifts with little to no sleep. Is it purposely, because that always puzzled me. the lives in people's hands and the decisions they make. And we know that
Yeah.
fatigue and mistakes go hand in hand. But is that purposely designed on purpose, or is it just the way that the training and the system works out, that they're understaffed and people just end up getting stretched to the limit and in their learning years have very little sleep?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I can comment to the capacity as an external observer. I'm not trained as a doctor or physician and haven't been through that training, but as an educator and someone that teaches, I teach into the medical program at the University of Sydney. I know that it's not an intentional thing to replicate the circumstances in which doctors will be exposed. So I think there's a cultural element, there's an element that there is need, and in fact that is what the reality is. But I know there's been extensive work done to try and improve the circumstances for young doctors in training, because we certainly can see the health impacts it's having on them earlier in their careers, with burnout, with errors, and with patients' health. So unfortunately, I think it's a little bit of hangover in terms of culture and conditions, and just the fact that we do have a really limited medical resource available to those in training. But I know certainly from our placement and clinical placement perspective, there's been a lot done to try and improve those conditions and to make students know they're safe to express that when there is a period of concern, that it's not something they should just put up with and get used to. So, yeah, it is concerning, I agree.
Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
At one stage in sleep, it mentioned that it repairs tissue and a kind of healing process takes place, and that it's good for the immune system as well. And yet we're told that as we get older, those things yes, and
Yes.
that our immune system, does that mean we need to sleep more to make that happen, or it just doesn't happen as you get older?
That's a fantastic question. So I'd look at it as there being less opportunity for that deeper restorative phase. We want to build as much as we can in our behaviour so that that opportunity is there within the window of sleep we get. But it seems that there is going to be less of that deep restorative healing, immune related. I don't know whether we have the evidence to say that that is exactly linked then to disease progression. And as we age, disease progression unfortunately worsens. Or whether part of it is that natural time course of us as humans and what our body does. But I'm sorry to say a yes, it seems that contradicts. Yeah.
Two questions, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Just practical wise, how long before you would go to bed would you start that routine of like dimming lights, off phones? So for your example of going to bed at 10:45, when would you start doing that?
Yep, so normally 2 to 2.5 hours, I'd recommend certainly having that quiet window. That's hard, so definitely an hour even to start should be beneficial, but normally that onset of melatonin is anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours before sleep onset begins. So, yeah. Sorry.
Is that the same for kids?
Yeah, great question, B. I believe so. So I think that melatonin onset is also of a similar time frame before, but those feelings of sleepiness and tiredness as signals, that might be within that period of reducing light exposure, and so it's then closer to bedtime, if that makes sense. So if we've got 2 hours of wind down being lamps only. So in my home, we do only have lamps on, and as the night progresses, we turn off lights in any room we're not in. So the only light source is that room and space that we're in. And then if it's music or sounds, they're calmer. And then meal times as well, just trying to ensure that if kiddies' bedtimes are 7:30, they're eating about 5:36 if possible. So the wind down I'd start, but if in all earnest, 1 hour would be, I think, sufficient if you've had a calmer evening kind of thing before.
And secondly, is it ideal to have the same bedtime and wake-up time? So
Yeah.
we need that kind of, what was it, 7 to 9 hours?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Yep. So your wake time drives your sleep time. So if you can have the same wake-up time each day, that will help regulate your bedtime. And if you want a day of sleep in, I'd try and limit it to 1 day a week and do that perhaps on a Saturday, so that your Sunday you're getting up a regular time to get you in good stead for the rest of the week to follow. Yeah, great questions.
I've got 2 questions too.
That's fine.
So the first one is, how often or how usual is it for someone to wake up at 3 o'clock for, let's say, 5 minutes? The second one is, if coffee is bad for you later on, what are a couple of foods that are good for you, maybe even with melatonin in them?
Yeah, great questions. It is very normal to wake up through the night, not just at 3 a.m, but actually after each cycle. So I'm really glad you asked that, because there is often an expectation that a good night's sleep means that we don't wake up at all, and that's just not the case. So between each of those 90 to 110 minute cycles, you could wake up, and it might just be a few minutes and then you're going back to sleep. So what we want to try and do is avoid going, oh, I'm awake, oh, this is a problem. It's very normal, very common, and yeah, that's not an issue or a concern as such. It's a concern if then you stay awake, or if you're getting the phone out or doing other things to keep awake. The second question is actually, it made me grin. When I was in my first year of PhD and knew nothing about sleep, I had to go to this meeting with Nestle. And Nestle wanted to make a food that would help people sleep. I don't know much about that. And we still don't know much about that. So we can't put melatonin into foods because it is a supplement. And it's a we've learnt tonight, it's a hormone, it's a signal to the brain that it's dark. So there aren't necessarily foods I know of that promote melatonin production as such, because it's a dark light hormone. It's more the timing of food that I'd probably be looking at. So I would be having the meal earlier in the evening, because that signal of eating is a signal of daytime as well, and light. It will affect those zeitgebers. It is a zeitgeber. It's one of those things that influence or entrain the circadian cycle in the body. Milk has tryptophan in it, which is sleep promoting. So warm cup of milk might be good. That's why little children also like warm cups of milk as well, and avoiding the caffeine where possible. So in terms of nutrition and sleep, there's not been a lot of recent progress that I'm familiar with. I haven't looked at sleep aids, but yeah, that would be my suggestion. If I come up with more stuff, I'll pop it in the comments of the YouTube link though. Yeah.
You mentioned 3 a.m.
Yes, the dreaded 3 a.m.
The dreaded 3 a.m. That's about the time I get to sleep.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm excited if I get 3 hours.
Yep.
And I'm awake at 6.
Yep. And
the alarm doesn't go off till 7. So...
You're tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my middle name.
So looking at that scenario, and I'm sure you've voiced it, and there may be others in the room experiencing that as well, I'd rather than be radical and say, well, try and get to bed at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. because that's fruitless. A drug-induced, yeah, at 3. So
I take it at 2.
PM or AM?
AM.
Have you spoken?
I read for a little while.
Yep.
I go straight back to bed.
Yep.
So...
have you spoken to your doctor about trying to take it like at 1 instead of 2?
Trouble is I have to get up and go to the toilet too much.
It's a tricky balance. My suggestion, and obviously I'm not managing you medically and can't give advice in that sense, but it would be making small increments of change to titrate or move it back a little at a time rather than a radical change. So look at fluid intake later in the night if the toilet frequency is an issue as well. But you're going to sleep at 3 a.m, you said. for the first time in that evening. Yeah. So if you're taking medication to help that at 2 a.m., I would look at reducing fluid intake from 9 or 10 p.m.
I only have enough fluid to take my evening medication, and that could be at 7 or 8
in the evening.
PM.
Yep, and nothing after that as
that.
well. It sounds like you'd be a good person to see one of my sleep colleagues.
I have a lung physician who is also a sleep
Excellent.
guy.
Excellent. I think in these kinds of complex cases, I think there's a lot of different. It's a longer conversation of everything going on. But I think certainly speaking to someone experienced around medication timing and then all the other factors we spoke about with behaviour to see. But yeah, it might be better for a longer conversation after. Good question. I'm sorry to hear it's short. One more question I have time for. Jerry.
Thank you. I put my hand up because I consider that I need longer sleep. But what happens is I fall asleep instantly, no trouble there.
Yep.
But then at 2 o'clock till 5 o'clock, I'm wide awake.
Yeah.
And then I fall asleep again and the alarm goes off at 6.
Yep.
But I stay in bed till 7, pretending I'm asleep. And then I need a nap in the afternoon. So do you think cutting out the naps would help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that sleep pressure that we spoke about, that would be immediately increased, which might help reduce. You might still have a wakeful period in the middle of the night, but it might increase the pressure enough that that wake period is shorter. And then I'd look at what's happening in that wake period. So one of the sleep psychologists that I work with has a rule that the bed is just for sleeping. And if you're awake, you get out of the bedroom as well. So if you're awake and they're pretending to be asleep or in that middle of the night period, get out of the room then. And this is advice more so for people who have sleep problems, who do have insomnia. Remove yourself from the room if you're awake and try and do the quiet calming activities until you feel tired, and then you go back to the room to sleep.
I like that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. I hope it helps. Thank you, everyone, very much. Good questions. How great.
Thank you, Lizzie. We've been really grateful for your time with us to share your wisdom and expertise. If anyone's looking for slides that you saw on the screen, if thought, I'd like to get a closer look, you can go to our YouTube channel and rewatch this, pick up all the bits you didn't get, and also see the slides in more detail as well. So they'll be there. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
We are really glad to have you. Please express your thanks.
Anytime. Thank you.
You are very welcome to stick around and have some supper, but you might find that we've just hit the melatonin time.
Yes.
Plus the temperature's dropped, the rain is falling, it sounds beautiful, it might be the perfect time for bed.
Yes.
So you make that choice. But thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.